Welcome. In this tutorial, I'll be teaching you how to get components within Unity. This is a topic that always confused me at the start, but I'll try to explain it as best as I can in this video. So we'll start off by creating a C# script, and we'll name it GetComponent. Double click on it to open the script. So to get a script in Unity, you need to do two things. Set a variable to that component and then get that component. So if you haven't watched my referencing video, go ahead and watch that. I'll be leaving a link in the description, but this is going to be using the information in that video to help you understand how to get components. So we'll start off by creating an object in Unity, because if you want to get a component, you need the component to actually exist. So once you create a cube object, a 3D object, within that you can see transform, cube, mesh renderer, box collider, etc. all these components. What you want to do is simply drag your script into the object you just created. Going back into your script, for what you want to grab, you need to save it into a variable, which in this case we are trying to grab the transform, so we're saving it into a variable called transform and has the variable type transform. Next, what we want to do is in the start method, we want to create the get component part. So we'll take the transform, because this value can only save the type that's transform. If you put anything else here, for example, if you wanted to save transform but instead you put a box collider here, it won't work. So you need a variable that gets the value transform, and we'll make it equal to simply get component, and you need to put in this angular brackets what you want to get. So in our case it's the transform, so transform. And to finish it off, you need to do this syntax where you put a bracket and semicolon. Okay, you might see this an error on this, but there's actually nothing wrong with this. It's just the fact that I spelled it wrong. So if I put it as that, this should be fine. This is how you get a component in Unity. It's this simple. At the start, I was very confused why you need to repeat the transform so many times all over the place. But now that I understand, it's basically saving it into a variable that can only take the type of transform. And this is basically the name. You can name it anything. You can name it Bob or cherries. It doesn't matter. And this is the part where it gets the components. So this is the type of variable it's saved into, and this is the part where we get components. Okay, now let's go ahead and link it up. So you can just simply drag it into the component section, and it is now connected. So in going back into your code, you can modify it however you want now in the update. Many videos I made before, I just simply used the get component but never explained it, so that now you know how to get a component. You can apply many of the things that I showed in my past videos to help you make your game. And when getting a component in Unity, there's a few ways to do it. The way I've shown you before, it's not required if you want to get a component that's within the object. So if you wanted to, for example, get the transform of this current cube, you can just simply type transform dot whatever. You don't actually need to get the component for the transform of an object if the object, like the script, is on the object that you're trying to get. But what I said before only applies to the transform basically. So if you try to get any other component, let me just get a rigid body on the object. So if you try to get this without using the get component method, if you just simply type get rigid body, if you want to add force to it, you can't, because this is just a variable. You need to save a variable to this first to modify it. So what we can do is use the same method as before. Get a private variable, so we name it rigid body, and we can name it RB, and in the void start we'll save RB to get component variable rigid body, finishing off with the bracket and semicolon. So now what we can do is for example on start rigid body dot add force. There we go. Now we can add force to this rigid body, and we can add whatever we want. So this is how you use get components in Unity if the component is on the object that you want to get. So you might be asking, what if I want to get the component that's not on this object? That's where the method I showed you earlier comes in. We can change this to a public variable, meaning that we can drag a component in. So if we save this and go back to Unity, there we go. You see that there's an open field now for rigid bodies, and any other object that has a rigid body will be able to drag into this and it will work. So right now this sphere has no rigid bodies, and if we try to drag it in, it doesn't let us. But if we add a rigid body to this, we don't need to drag this rigid body in like that. We can just drag the object in and it will get the rigid body itself. So we've dragged the rigid body in, and now we've saved the sphere's rigid body into this. So we can now add force to the sphere. So if I go on the sphere, when the game starts, the cube will stay in place or just fall down because it has a rigid body, but the sphere will do whatever we want inside the cube code. So what we can do is get a component of another object within this current object. In summary, GetComponent is divided up to 2 steps. First step, setting the variable, and second step, actually getting the component. So when you're getting the variable, you need to save it into a variable type that matches your component. So I'm getting the rigid body and I'm saving into a variable type of rigid body. And the name of the variable has to match as well. You can name it anything you want. I'm naming mine RB because it's short for rigid body. And next up is what you want to do to the the component you're trying to get. So in this case, I'm applying force to the rigid body that I'm getting, and you can see that it is applying force up to the cube. So then the cube gets launched into the sky while the circle drops. When the sphere drops. Hopefully that was helpful and you enjoyed it. I've definitely had some hard time trying to understand how to get variables when I first started Unity, but I tried my best in explaining how to get it in the simplest form, and I hope this helped you a bit. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye. And if you're trying to do the same process to a sphere than you did to the box, you will simply add public game object sphere like I showed you before. So it will create a public field where you can drag your sphere in, and within that you can get the rigid body component. So what we're doing here is basically treating the sphere as if this script is attached to that object, and we're getting a rigid body variable, and we're saving that variable to the sphere. So the game object dot next level down sphere dot get component of rigid body, and we're doing the same thing to the cube. Now if we run this, the cube will drop while the sphere gets launched up. So let's hope Unity do not crash on me. So Unity crashed on me and I can no longer go back into the project. I think I've lost it, but it's the same process. So you get the component in a public field and name it into anything you want, as well as naming a rigid body variable type and naming it whatever you want. Then in the start method, you want to apply to the rigid body is the object, so the game object dot get component, and the type is rigid body, and save it into the variable type called RB. I really want to show you an example of how all this works, but my Unity crashed, so I really can't. And in the update, you can just apply whatever you want to the component. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video and this has helped you in some way, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.